What's going on, everybody? Today we're talking about $1 trillion. That's what Morgan Stanley is saying that the S&P 500 is projected to save by using AI. But there's a lot more to this, as you would imagine. There's just not just that clickbait, article title, but everything else that goes along with it. So in today's show, we're going to be talking about like which industries look to be the most vulnerable for AI-driven disruption. But even breaking that down and talking about agentic workflows versus something that would be like truly embodied AI, aka humanoid or other types of robots that are replacing current human work, like we're seeing in, our Amazon warehouses and things like that. So we're going to look at the sectors that don't currently run lean on labor, where both fully agentic processes and the workflows can, reshape not structures, cost structures, productivity, as well as jobs. And the really big question is, if AI rewrites industry economics, who stands to gain? Who risks collapse? What does this all mean for the workers in the middle? This is the Daily AI Show. Today is September 2nd, 2025. With me today, we have Andy, Jimmy, Carl, and Brian. And guys, I want to kind of like maybe start this off by just bringing up one of the articles that I was leaning on for this that first caught my attention. It was actually out of Fortune. Now, this is a Morgan Stanley research paper that they put together, but this Fortune one blog does a pretty good job of sort of giving us the highlights. Let me just get this up on screen real quick. Let's look at a few things. So right off the bat, like we were saying, they're saying AI revolution could cut nearly $1 trillion a year out of the S&P 500 budgets. Morgan Stanley says largely from agents and robots doing human jobs. And then if we get into this article a little bit more, not only do they sort of set it up here, but if we go down, they're talking about like who they were having access to, and they could only really get reliable data for 90% of the S&P 500. So sort of pointing out that they didn't have the total S&P, but that they felt this was relevant. Says the projected savings equate to roughly 28% of the index's 2026 pre-tax earnings. And then they're talking about the $920 billion figure represents 41% of the total S&P 500 compensation expense. They add, and then they were talking about how it was only on the 90%. And what I wanted to do is get down and really have more of a conversation about this part, which is like the sectors most exposed. And this Fortune article says not all industries will feel the effects equally. As you can see from the chart below, which we'll show you guys here in a second to talk about, consumer staples, distribution and retail, real estate management, and transportation are among the most exposed sectors, with potential AI-driven productivity benefits exceeding 100% of forecast 2026 earnings. Healthcare equipment and services, autos, and professional services also face major disruption and opportunity. By contrast, industries that already run lean on labor relative to earnings, such as semiconductors and hardware, show comparatively lower AI value potential. And then we have this exhibit here, and I'm going to share it on this tab instead, so it's a little bit easier. It gets a little fuzzy there, but this is what they're referring to as far as the excuse me, the exhibit or the chart below what we were just reading. And if you were to look down, and if you were listening to us, it's totally fine. But if you look down towards the bottom of this chart, they're really talking about, again, like they have real estate here, consumer staples, transportation, healthcare, automotive, consumer services, capital goods. All of them are towards the bottom of this chart, which also means there are areas that might be impacted more. And as they were mentioning, areas like semiconductors and semiconductor equipment or technology hardware and equipment, financial services, they see those as running a little bit more lean as far as their labor. And so if that's the case, there's probably less for AI to come in and perhaps make an impact on. And then also in the article, as I was saying in the top of the show, they also break out between agentic workflows, our typical AI automations that we have today, but also areas where, embodied AI or AI in robots that are doing various things. They do not have to be humanoid. They don't have to look like us for it to count. Obviously, areas where you have a lot of people currently doing those types of jobs. Again, think like your Amazon or your Walmart warehousing. And those are being replaced by autonomous robots, which is already happening. That's nothing new. You can see how that would have a major, major impact on jobs in those areas, those sectors versus maybe the semiconductors. So that's just a high level to get us started here, so everybody knows what we're kind of talking about. But really, this is about just having a great conversation about where this 1 trillion could potentially have an impact. And again, this might happen over years, if not decades. Morgan Stanley certainly was not saying that this was a 2026 thing, but they were just making projections towards the future of these S&P 500 companies. Carl, I know you only have a little bit of short time with us, so I want to bring you in first. Obviously, you deal with a lot of companies through 0 to 60 AI. You're always, I know you've talked to us before, you're always in meetings, you're usually in person in meetings. How does this line up with what you're seeing in terms of AI disruption?
The first thought I had was when I think it was 2023, very, very similar reports came out. I just can't remember who. It feels like the exact same companies were making the projections.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like we just don't know. I think the only thing though, in terms of whether money is in or money is out, is I still have a kind of pessimistic view of people who, or businesses just even adopting AI. Like it's a hard slog for just companies in general to, let alone try to put AI into their current services, right? And I feel more optimistic for companies who are native. So to me, that is the real threat, which for some of these companies. So I'm not sure about millions of dollars or trillions of dollars. I think it'll just change, like where we are today versus where we were a couple of years ago, 2022, 2023, going into 2026. Can you believe that? We have like one more quarter. And I think it's very fascinating. I want to point down to China versus, let's say, North America. And maybe we can go down this route, maybe not. Do you notice in if all the talk of our, businesses, our governments here, it's all about, oh, what can this model do for me? What can, whatever model that do we have? And then even talking to business, like obviously a lot of them use ChatGPT. It's like, oh, can ChatGPT do use this? Okay. Versus in China, just so many, whether it's podcasts, news articles, all the various news sources, you can't be 100% sure. But from what I'm hearing is they're looking at not trying to the one model to rule them all, but rather, hey, all the stuff we have today, how can we integrate it into government? How can we integrate it into business? How can we integrate it into your daily life? Like, how can we actually productize it to go into, what you're doing? And not that we're not doing it here, but they're doing it on a national scale. Like that's part of the some of the operations that they're doing. So I'm curious to see how those two different approaches or mindsets are, because you can kind of see where, yeah, it's obviously easy with the Chinese government to be like, hey, we're going to go this direction, everyone's going to follow. Very easy to do that versus North America, Canada, United States. It's very hard to do that. But I'd be curious to see with AI especially, maybe we kind of need sort of that JFK, hey, we have a mission, put man on the moon versus the Russians to do it, right? Even Paul Reitzer was talking about like two years ago, he was saying, hey, we need a national effort to do that. I don't think there's a national effort. I think there's hey, get out of the way of the business and just let them kind of go where they take us, versus I think China's like, hey, let's get going and do that. So very, very interesting take, which and then relates back to the S&P, because where will the money be then moved around? Because the money has to go somewhere, right? If you're losing trillions of dollars in the S&P, that money is going to flow somewhere. I'm not sure where that money will flow. Will there be brand new industries that money will be invested in. Maybe it doesn't even leave the S&P. There'll be just different things that money will go to. Maybe the same Fortune 500. Maybe someone, I have a feeling Andy might know this, and not because I think Andy might know this because his time as like a CTO, maybe they're keeping track of these numbers. How often does the S&P 500 change? Who is in there, who's out? Because that, to me, that'll tell me, like, if obviously it's a rapid drawdown, how fast businesses are leaving versus new ones in. How does that impact? And then he's gone. So obviously, Brian's gone. But yeah, you kind of know where I'm kind of going with that.
I can opine on that. Yeah. So first of all, the total market cap of the S&P 500 is 60 trillion, roughly $60 trillion. And, that's a huge index. The S&P 500 is a very large index. And yeah, the competitive changes in various industries do cause some people to fall off the S&P 500 and others come in, but it's fairly stable because of the scale of that thing. So it's not like it's really radically changing, in a near-term basis. But I wanted to bring your attention to something about that market cap. So what the Morgan Stanley report says is that the $1 trillion of savings that S&P 500 companies have available to them through automation and embodied AI, and I'm using automation as a shorthand term for this agentic workflow assistance that's going to, replace some workers, but also augment other workers who are skillful with them and allow them to fulfill multiple roles within the company. So overall, this $1 trillion is being saved by reduction in headcount. Mm-hmm. That's where it's coming from. And it says it's going to be $1 trillion annually for the S&P 500, this $57 trillion value collection of companies. The market cap addition that will be created by that reduction of headcount will be about 15 trillion. That's in the Morgan Stanley report. Now, remember, the Morgan Stanley analysts they're constantly trying to figure out, okay, where do we put our money? Where do we put our clients' money? And they do deep analysis on what the prospects are for each company and for the market overall. And what this is telling you is that 15 trillion is going to be added to the $60 trillion value right now. That's a major increment to the S&P 500. And what does that mean? Stock values are going to go up dramatically because of AI. At the same time as almost half of the employees who are currently the largest expense of the S&P 500, right? The labor component is really what's costing the loss of all those jobs. Nearly half of those jobs are going to be carved out of those companies. And so stocks are going to go up in value and household values are going to go down because they're going to lose their income. That's the takeaway on this thing. It's astounding, frankly.
And I think who's going to lose, or not even lose, who isn't going to get hired? Because it's probably through attrition, right? It's not necessarily, there might be sweeping layoffs, but that goes back to what you're saying, Carl, about there has to be a verified working AI process in place that you can now say these 100 workers, we've successfully replaced them. That, I agree, is probably less likely than what we've already seen in the news from CEOs, Duolingo and some others, who basically came out and said, and kind of got flack for it too, got pushback. But the gist was, if you want to hire somebody new, or in a lot of cases, replace somebody who left through natural means, like they just left the company, you have to prove that that job cannot be done through AI. In other words, you have to prove the need for the human in the loop. And so where will AI come after jobs the fastest? Well, we do see it in robotics and stuff like that, but more than likely it's going to be your entry level, post college, entry level type jobs. And it's going to be the ones that are very repetitive. That's usually where the robotics comes in. Also, areas where it's highly dangerous. And so companies not only have payroll, they have things like OJIs, on the job injuries, that they have to deal with. I mean, you can imagine, even if you were in a somewhat safe environment, but you're around these massive towers of product that you would see when we look on like CNBC and we see like what's inside a Amazon shipping center. It's obvious that that could be an area that could be high potential for injury, but also just repetitive things like people with carpal tunnel and things like that would stop them from working. They would have to get rehab for. And so obviously that gets replaced by the AI embodied, AI type solutions. But that's just robotics. That's more than likely not going to touch as many people's lives and jobs as the other side, which is what we tend to talk more about, is more the generative AI side of it, which is, hey, can AI take this part of your job, this part of your task, your daily task, off your plate? I am currently working with a client right now who is, one person is leaving the company and they've said, we don't think we're going to replace that person. And I'm actively working with them as part of that solution. Call it whatever you want. I'm working with the company because there's probably a potential that they don't necessarily need to replace that role. So I think that's what stands out to me, Andy, more than anything else, is like, not just that companies will see record profits because their headcount will be lower and they'll just be, for lack of a better term, much, much more efficient at producing the same amount of goods and services for a much leaner budget. But also, it's not most likely going to be the CEO. It's not going to be the directors, the VPs, the senior managers. That's probably not where you're going to see AI touch. Not to say that it won't over the next decades. It certainly will, as AI encroaches on span of control. There's a lot of areas where right now it does not make sense. Your typical in firefighting, it was always 5 to 8 people, I believe, or 3 to 8 people was your typical span of control. And I found that to be a similar number through business and industry and stuff. That typically you don't want one person having more of a span of control over 3 to 5 to 8, depending on what the role is. Well, that's true too in sales to the most case. You have AEs that are looking out over regular sales reps, right? Well, we're already seeing that now AI is making it possible for the AE to oversee 20, 30 sales reps, maybe more in the future. I don't know. Maybe they only need one manager in the future in sales that can effectively manage and take care of 100 reps. I don't know. Maybe that's stressing it too far. But that's where you'll start to see it, I think, come in at those other levels. But for the next several years, I think it's going to be attrition. I think it's going to be those jobs just simply do not get put back up on the job boards. They don't go on the LinkedIn jobs. They just aren't on Upwork. They're not there anymore. And then you go, well, what are your recent grads, your folks that are, trying to cover 2 jobs? What are they supposed to do if those jobs aren't being replaced? And also if on their robotics side of it.
Yeah. So attrition is a reduction in force, right? You're going to reduce the total headcount through attrition. It just means you're going to wait until you can eliminate jobs, on a sort of a torturously slow basis, when it suits you. But that's happening. Also, alongside that, there are mass layoffs that are attributed to AI, like Oracle. Serious, workforce reductions, just laying off thousands of people. Dropbox, Block,
LinkedIn.
CNN. CNN announced job cuts. I think Salesforce, just in the past 10 days or so, announced major layoffs. The tech sector overall has tens of thousands of jobs have been laid off from multiple small companies, and largely for entry-level roles, right? They're not just stopping hiring entry-level positions. They're getting rid of those positions and allowing certain levels of automation to replace the work that was being done by those people in the junior positions. So you're right that it's not going to be the CEO or the director level people. It's going to be the people who are trying to work their way up that ladder carefully. And, you know, there's prohibitions like the Shopify one where you can't hire somebody, no additional hiring until and unless you've proven that AI can't do that job. So overall, about, well, the Morgan Stanley prediction is 41% of the headcount basically is going to be reduced in the S&P 500. And that's going to hit earliest and hardest for the junior level people trying to enter into the marketplace. There's just not going to be, there's not going to be beds for them in those companies. And that's really disturbing generationally. The people who are graduating from college right now or who just did and who are starting college right now, the prospects they have for satisfying entry-level positions, not so good.
Jimmy, your thoughts?
I pretty much align with what Andy's laid out in terms of what we're actually going to see, and it's a little sobering because the way that and speed that we've commented over and over in which AI progresses and moves means that everything that it touches is going to be hit with that same speed. So the recovery factor, new jobs will be created to fill the old ones. That concept, I think, might be a little short-sighted in terms of what kinds of actual jobs that will be created. I mean, I've heard maybe a handful, but if your goal as a company is to reduce force to increase your profit margin, then you're not looking at redistribution of that force. You're not looking at replacement of that force. You may have people that are gaining enough skill to where they take their a small percentage of that, for whether it be you become an AI wrangler or a management of AI context or the updates to update it or maintain it kind of thing. But that's still going to be a small percentage of what the massive change is going to be. So I think what we need to do is we need to take a look at what the opportunities are here, since we're seeing this wave, right? We can see the tsunami coming. We have to take some definitive action. Unfortunately, you don't deal with a tsunami by trying to build a wall to stop the tsunami. You got to get out. You got to leave the valley. You got to get up to the mountains, or you just got to get out of the way of the tsunami. So what can we do to move around or over or through that tsunami or that wave of massive exposure and change? And so one of the things that were floated was this idea of not just upskilling, right? I'm sure that'll mitigate a little bit of it, but a re-evaluation and approach to labor and just the job market as a whole, and what kind of jobs that we need and what we'll be focusing on. Some have said that some of the sectors that'll be less affected or affected slower will be the things where you need highly skilled physical labor and trades and things like that. And to a certain point, I do believe that, but with embodied AI, that's going to become less and less and less, right? I think one of the opportunities here, though, and something that we want to discuss, I don't know, here or maybe in a different show, is the concept of your process cycles, right? And in this case, labor. Okay. Are there companies? Is there any significant movement in the mindset of, I have X amount of labor? Can I redistribute them or repurpose them to maximize my productivity, as opposed to let's save a bunch of money and that'll look good on the, in the market or anything like that. Will that be a longer term gain for me? Do I now have a labor force that I can train to gain me the productivity that I'm really looking for? And of course, providing additional skill set or providing additional avenues for that labor, as opposed to just cutting them off and chucking them out into the street. So I think I guess a great way to conceptualize this is the news industry or information, right? News has been around forever. These large institutions are seeing some really big impacts from AI. There's lots of lawsuits going back and forth and things like that. But the foundational AI companies need more information. And it's humans that create the information, the actions that we do, every breath we take, every step we take, that kind of thing is generating more information. And foundation AI companies always want more data, more information. So why isn't there a path for new journalists, new news organizations that are supported or patronized by these foundational AI companies, right? Why isn't there a multiple process cycle in which to bring people into the overall process? Now, this idea is a little lofty but requires a lot of detail and thought on. But I think having any company that sees this wave and everyone who's part of this wave is just all moving along with each other, there might be an opportunity for those who surf the wave, for those who crest the wave, in the sense that if you're not going with the flow, there is a good chance that you can see some sort of value or win out of trying to take a different tack or a different mindset. And I think that might be an interesting opportunity to explore. Is we already see this kind of report coming from Morgan Stanley presents, hey, look at all of these sectors. We think this is what's going to happen. And like Andy said, the biggest change is going to be in headcount. That's what's going to get hit 100% of the time there. That's what they see as their biggest win. So let's look at the situation as with a different mindset, and perhaps we'll see even greater long-term roles, long-term changes, and a long-term value for both the labor side as well as management and C-suite and stuff like that.
Yeah, there will be opportunities for people, and I want to describe a strategy that you can take right now inside your company if you're buying into the premise that over the course of the next several years there will end up being fewer people than there are right now in your company. And you want to know, how do I become one of the people who takes on broader responsibility at a higher level of sort of executive function, where I'm using AI assistants to, replace the people who had to go because they didn't have the skills to do what I'm doing. And that gets down to the whole question of how do you advance your personal practice inside a company of accelerating and enhancing your skill and your span of control, let's call it, using AI, so that you are the one that the company says, wait, Joe, we can't let Joe go because Joe is, picked up when Sally left, picked that up, and he's handling that too. And I think he can do more because he's got a crew of agents working for him that are doing this. That is the future for the
Mhm.
people who are going to remain in those organizations. So
I agree with that. With the current mindset, that of course is the steps that you need to take. I agree with that. I'm looking at a more longer view where we need to skip that. We need to get to a higher level than, okay, what can I do to just save myself? Right? That's short-term thinking. What's
yeah,
long-term
that's the
thinking?
capital free market, approach. Is like, what can I do to save myself? I have to increase my value, even if it's at the expense of others. But I've got to be the winner in this game.
Yeah, I mean,
That's what
you have
free
to.
market is all about.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, look, I personally would have probably been out of a job had I not pivoted to AI, because what I did beforehand, maybe not. I mean, I did consultancy work at Scaled, and handled all of our LinkedIn strategy. It was what I was hired to do several years ago, 4 years ago. And obviously with AI, a lot of what I was delivering to them beyond the strategy, which was a big part of it, was actually customized LinkedIn posts and things like that. And obviously that got drastically easier. There's still a good reason to have somebody who's a really good copywriter outside of AI. I don't mean to say AI can replace a great copywriter, because I know a few phenomenal ones. It certainly brought a tool to a lot of people who had no skill in writing great copy and leveled them up. And so what it did was it made it so that some people just didn't need to have that expense. Copywriting is expensive to have somebody come in and do that. And we certainly had clients that paid us good money to have me run their entire LinkedIn strategy for them over several accounts and different things like that. I I look back at that and I go, I mean, I'm glad I obviously made the pivot. It's because I could truly see, like you guys, that I was going to love talking about AI. This is not a chore for me. It's the work I do, but it's also not a chore for me to talk about this every day. And that was pretty obvious early on for me. And so I made that pivot. I guess nothing was guaranteed that, nothing's guaranteed that I stay in the position I'm in. It's possible that I am building the solutions that replace me at Scaled. But to your point, Andy, like, well, okay, so does that mean you don't do it? No, I think of it as like, well, yes, I am building solutions that operationalize and scale what I'm capable of doing at Scaled so that we can grow and bring on more and more AI consultancy clients. That's the goal. And then what that means is that I have to level up. I have to go to that next level and say, okay, it's one thing that I can build and do, but can I manage and accurately distribute my knowledge to a team of people who can build and do and make sure that they stay on their project management timelines and things like that for our consultancies. And that will absolutely have to be where I elevate to. Otherwise, I will AI myself out of my own AI job. And I think there's a lot of people who probably feel that stress where, you got to look out for number one. But as you write new SOPs, as you operationalize, as you write down all the different steps, yeah, there's a lot of people who are going to protect that. I deal with it. I deal with people who are clearly protecting and they're gatekeeping and they're slowing down the progress that maybe we need to make with our clients, because I imagine they're fearful of what that means. If they give up the goods and they explain all the processes that they maybe uniquely know how to do, that exposes them. It exposes their job. It exposes the real possibility that the company may then go against what you're saying, Jimmy, which is redistribute labor into other areas and continue to grow. And perhaps it just means that there's no longer a job there for them. So I feel it. I mean, even though we talk about AI, I certainly feel it. I don't think any of us are immune to it. Maybe you a little bit more than the rest of us, Andy, since you're on the post major career part of it. I don't want to say retired. I don't think that's certainly
No,
accurate. I
No,
mean,
I'm
you do
retired.
work with mid-age.
I'm
You said and
retired.
stuff.
I can prove that I'm retired by the paucity of income, right? There's one test of whether you're truly retired or not. It's when your income drops to zero, then that's where it is. That's your retirement.
Okay, well, you are retired. I just knew you were doing consulting work and stuff like that a little bit
Yeah, well,
here and there. So yeah, but I understand what you're saying.
dabbling in that. Yeah.
Dabbling, yeah. So anyway, look, I think we've had a lot of people, Delman, Cisco, and Greg, and a bunch of other folks in our chat are also chiming in here. Delman saying we could see this coming when ChatGPT first hit. The mainstream, everything became about business and making money. The rest is an afterthought for the loudest voices. Cisco is talking about this as well. Greg has been talking about this. I appreciate all of y'all being in the chat and adding to this conversation. As always, we read all the conversations and pull them into the conversation. We read your chats and we pull them into the conversations wherever we can as we're having a conversation. I think there's, Jimmy, the only thing I'll say back to you is like, I think there is a lot of companies. In fact, we actually kind of talked about it yesterday when I was talking about Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, who was talking about, I think a lot of companies will, he was saying, I think a lot of companies will take and dust off these ideas that were on the shelf and perhaps put new energy towards them. Because as you get more and more efficient with AI, well, if you aren't fully looking to reduce labor and headcount, you might start taking those people that are, the AI is encroaching on their work a little bit more. And if you're really forward thinking, to your point, like how do you look beyond the next step, then it should really be about like, well, what big projects and how do we take really great workers, hopefully people who are just good people, they're a positive add to the company, whether that's remote or that's on-prem or whatever, and educate, retrain, or whatever they would have to do in order to put those people on a new project that perhaps just wasn't going to get any love and did not have any money to really support it. But maybe the company is saying, hey, that was a really good idea. We just don't have the resources to put against it. Well, AI may allow for some of that redistribution. Are more companies in the S&P going to go for reduced headcount and still hit this $1 trillion a year projection of Morgan Stanley? I don't know. But regardless, it's going to obviously have a big impact, right? Regardless of how it happens within the S&P, it's going to have a huge impact. And then I just want to like circle back on this point to you guys. On Thursday, we're going to talk a little bit more about AI literacy and education, but it's really more, that show is more about how AI literacy is becoming a battleground, and the companies that are getting embedded with AI literacy and AI tools for education are going to kind of rule the future the way Microsoft and Apple did with their early PCs and things like that. That's Thursday's conversation. But I bring that up to say this does this does still resonate with education. Andy, you said it earlier. So if you have those recent grads or people, look, your high school counselors aren't going to help you. They're not up on this. They have enough going on. They're going to push you into the things that they know. And more than likely that hasn't pivoted. I'm not picking on all high school counselors, but more than likely that hasn't pivoted as much as it would necessarily need to for really good guidance with AI involved. And so now, I mean, I always talk about my daughter who's 4 years out from college. Do I look at a list like this? When I say list, I'm looking at this chart. Do I start talking to my daughter more about, financial services or energy or banks or insurance? Some of these S&P sectors that are higher up this chart that are more efficient, run leaner with their headcount because they may be less impacted. Obviously, it would have to be something my daughter was into, but does she need to have this knowledge? Because she has to know, just because you want to do that work doesn't necessarily mean that's where the investment in education should go. Because if we're just projecting out a couple of years, we think this particular sector is going to get hit hard. And you don't want to be sitting on a 4-year degree that's really kind of worthless because you can't get an entry-level job to get the experience to then move up the chain, because that's been wiped out by AI. So just curious, before we sort of wrap up today's conversation, what's your guys' advice or thoughts on that for anybody that's in that? I don't know, Andy, you said like high school, I would say, to college to recent grad. Like where do you sort of adjust for this to try to protect your future?
Well, I think high school's premature for worrying about those things, with rare exceptions. People in high school are just trying to learn how to socialize and, get by, struggling to, actually complete the process of getting entry to the next phase, whether that's a gap year or college entry. And you would really have to develop at or about that time, I think, an interest in technology that goes beyond the social motives of using technology. So not social media, right? Unless you're going to do social media of the TikTok ilk, where you're going to actually try to be informative and educational for a certain market space, and you learn how to use those tools, for the purposes of, being an influencer who's at the vanguard of what it is that needs to be understood and known about the technology implication, or the implications of technology on your generation. I think that would be a really interesting thing to start to adopt at high school. But once you get into the college years, I'm not sure what college is going to look like. I actually discouraged my now 27-year-old daughter from continuing in college. And so that was many years ago now, but I'm glad I did. I don't think it would have served her particularly well. And, I'm coming from the standpoint of someone who, did the full, elite educational series, right? I was definitely a poster child for doing that. But I don't know that that's the right path anymore. You can learn so much more now, self-directed, accessing all the information streams that we do today, but focusing on those things that interest you in particular, but always in the background using now AI as a method for organizing, retaining, digesting, presenting, and accumulating a knowledge base that makes you an expert in some area, at least knowledgeable in some area, so that you can be a contribution to the people around you. It doesn't have to be just society broadly. You don't need to have that reach. But I would say that you need to have a level of intellectual and academic-like curiosity that pushes you toward developing something of your own, something that you can be recognized for, assessed for, as having achieved something that is, now something that you own. It's your personal capacity that somebody's going to find interesting, whether that's a life partner who may become your collaborator in doing things that are remunerative to you as a team, or in a company that needs people who can take initiative and self-educate and learn how to get things done.
I'm going to thank you for that. As you were talking, our live recording number restarted, Jimmy, at the top. And so I don't know what that means. I guess I can ask in the chat really quick.
It's
Mine
going for,
mine shows 42:55.
Oh, mine shows 49 seconds. So,
yeah. No,
so
it's
got a little concerned,
Yeah.
but it might have just been me on my blip on my side. But thank you. So sorry, Andy. I just was like, that was really nice, but I just want to make sure we were like live when that was actually happening. Yeah, I show zero people too in the chat. So obviously mine kind of reset on my side. All right. Anyway,
we just bumped up.
I can't see the time up there, but Jimmy, do you want to just kind of take us home on this, and then we'll wrap up for the day?
Sure. I love everything that you said, Andy. I think that is some great holistic view of approaching it. I'm gonna break from my perspective. I'm gonna break it down as simple as I can. Number one, unless you're highly privileged, life is going to get harder. Number two, empower yourself with AI. All of the things that Andy said, whatever you can do to really make your place in understanding these tools. Build your own set of things. If you think that, oh, hey, I want something to do this, or I want something to do that, or I need to fill in a certain gap, or things like that, build your own. That'll give you experience in the skill set and provide you more leverage in negotiation, which leads me to the last one is you work for yourself. You don't work for anybody else. You work with others. You collaborate with others. You, whether you have a W-2 or a 1099 or you're an entrepreneur, right? You work for yourself and don't give that power away. And then from there, that should hopefully give you the foundation to then enter into whatever aspects. Keep your mind open. Who says you have to work for somebody else? Why can't you do it yourself? And I think that's a lot of the empowerment that AI will give us, no matter what sector or industry or motivation or ideas or interests that we might have.
I do think you're right. We will see more entrepreneurs and more people who do independent work or independent contractors or whatever, 1099s, than we probably have ever seen in any time
By
previously. Because,
necessity. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, but also that could mean more wealth and more prosperous, times for them than, by any other means. Because to your point, Jimmy, you're at least the captain of your own ship, and there's something to be said for that. I've done both. I've been the entrepreneur. I've owned my own businesses, and I'm obviously salaried now. And there are pros and cons to both.
That's right. And you can be the captain of your own van down by the river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear Portugal is nice.
There's a lot of people living van life now, using Starlink and
listen. My wife and I talk about it often. I don't think either one of us, we don't need the big house. We don't need that stuff. So priority one is our daughter. And then after that, we do talk about Portugal and Faro and places like that have a much, much cheaper cost of living, because why not make my dollars go farther? So there's always those types of solutions too. All right, we got to wrap it up for today. Thanks to Andy, Jimmy. Carl had to drop earlier. He had some meetings, but make sure you guys come back the rest of the week. Tomorrow, Jimmy will be handling the news as always. I think I'll be here for that. Well, the three of us will be here. And then Thursday, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about the battleground that is AI literacy in our schools. Again, not so much about AI and how it's impacting education from that side. It's really about the businesses that are licking their chops and saying, ooh, if we build the new Apple IIe and we can get that into all classrooms, well, that's kind of like giving a kid a Happy Meal. You make them a McDonald's fan for life, right? So like they're trying to get in early, because we could talk about all that on Thursday about what that means when it comes to memory and long-term memory and AI for students. That'll be Thursday's conversation. Friday will be our sort of like recap show. It's always our, sort of open-ended conversation, whatever kind of floats the boat that day. That's what we'll handle on Friday. It's always a fun show. So with that, we'll wrap it for today. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you guys tomorrow.
Aloha.